We're here at the 2016 ESMO conference in Copenhagen, and I'm sitting down with Christian Dittrich. Good to see you, Doctor. I'm interested in knowing about, we hear from advocacy groups here at the Congress about the patient getting involved in the trial up front, in the configuration of the trial, setting the protocols, and I know you have some experience with that. From a clinical perspective, what's your opinion?
The patient is, let's say, what's all about, what we are doing, and all the developments, all what the progress in oncology has been, it's done for the purpose of better serving patients. So there is no doubt that the main person is the patient. In the past, of course, we have had a more, let's say, historically based hierarchical system which was accepted by the entire society and not just restricted for medicine or for the specific purpose of oncology in medicine, but we were much more hierarchically structured, and the developments or many questions have been reserved for persons who dedicated their profession to making up their minds and to do the roles and to do the laws, etc. Now there is a tendency of a, let's say, higher democratization process, and the hierarchy is going to be flattened, and we see that the main person for whom all that is finally done comes more into the game, which is an important development into my eyes. It has to be integrated in a stepwise process, and it's clear that there are situations where it's a question of information on the side of the patient to be integrated into the discussion. But we learned that there are patient advocacy groups, mostly patients or relatives of patients or persons engaged with patients' topics, and they have a quite high level of understanding. Sometimes they have even a professional background, which may help in addition. But even without a very dedicated medical background or biological background, they may play a very important role, because it's up to them to decide what's worth for them to be suffered or to be accepted as a side effect, and also to define what's the most important goals of studies of new developments. For instance, one could say only a longer survival would be a goal which is in interest of a specific person, but another person has a completely different idea what's important for her and for him. For that person, lack of side effects may be much more important. So what we have to then find out in detail is, what is the actual situation? Is it, for instance, a situation of a curative potential treatment? Then patients usually would accept higher toxicity, more problems, if at the end a potential cure can be the goal. If somebody is upfront in the situation where, at least with all the tools we have nowadays at our disposition, this seems to be impossible, it may be more wise and more accepted by a patient to decrease the potential side effects as good as possible. And I think it's mainly in the discussion of protocols where the fixation of the goals and, on the other side, what's acceptable to them has to be discussed, where they could and should be integrated.
You mentioned the hierarchy, and are there one or two things that we can point to that maybe have occurred that are breaking that hierarchy down? Is it more access to information that breaks the hierarchy down that you speak of?
I think the process of breaking down hierarchies has already started in the entire society, and it's already also integrated to a certain extent, not perfectly, but to a certain extent into our actual society. Let's take the example of a representation of a patient or a patient advocate in all ethical committees. This was not always the case. This is now even a formal requirement, and it's good. And many times, it's the patients who are defending a more risky strategy with the potential of gaining more than many others, let's say, than the representatives of law or the representative of other professional fields. And I could imagine that if patients would get an even louder voice, a voice which may be even heard by the regulators and by the European Parliament, that then various various legal steps may be also modified to a certain extent, and more risks being acceptable in the future for development of new drugs. I'm rather sure that patients are running for accepting a higher risk, but with the potential aim of gaining more, whereas the actual professional groups are a little bit more in a defensive situation, because of course if something happens, then it's in the news and they are assaulted that they have not taken care enough and they should have known what might have happened.